So welcome everybody. My name is Liz Rich and I'm the Acting Director of Strategic Partnerships and Initiatives at the Feliciano Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Montclair State University. And welcome to the final week of our Weekly Women Entrepreneurship Series. This week we are so excited to be speaking with women leaders in innovation. And if you're receiving our updates, you saw that earlier this week we spoke with Marjorie Perry of MZM Construction. But today we are thrilled to be speaking with Dani Hughes, who recently became president of San Blas Securities when her previous firm, Divine Capital, merged with San Blas Securities. And Dani also founded Divine Capital Markets and is co-founder of Divine Asset Management, which provides financial planning and holistic wealth management services. So thank you, Dani, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Liz.
We're so excited. So I know you're going to take us through your thoughts on the power and influence of female investors and how we can build our empires, you phrase it. But first, I'd love to hear more about your personal journey and sort of how you've arrived at this moment as both an innovator and as a founder. So tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Sure. I mean, it's unusual. I did not plan on being in financial services at all. I knew zero about the markets and about anything that had to do with money, really. I grew up on Long Island, went to college and studied political science, which brought me nothing in finance. In fact, I had one class in accounting and I dropped out of it in the middle of college because I thought it was too hard and too complex. So moved out to California after I had graduated from school because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I found myself on the beach and bartending and waitressing and having a great time out in San Diego. And some guy who used to come to my bar would always say, you know, you would be a great stockbroker. And I was like, what's a stockbroker? Like, I had no idea what that even was. And so I went for an interview and it was actually a boiler room. If you've ever seen that movie, Wall Street, that's exactly where I worked, except I knew nothing about what was possible and what was wrong. And so I ended up working there for a short period of time. But the reason was because I was so interested in what these guys were doing. It was all guys, big watches, huge cars. I was like, I want to watch in a car like that. I want money. I want to understand how to create money. And that really wasn't the place to learn that, but I did learn a lot. I learned that there was such a conflict of interest in respect to like what a stockbroker was trying to sell somebody and what was good for that person and why they were trying to sell it to them. So then I moved back to New York, which is where I'm from, and got a job on a trading desk and became a market maker. So over time, worked my way up to become have my own list. I was the first woman with my own list of stocks to trade. I started the IPO and secondary desk. This is in the mid to late 90s and the market was flying high at that time. And then I decided that, well, if my boss could do it, I could do it. You know, I was kind of reverse inspired because he would come in with his coffee cup full of white wine in the morning and say to me, so Jessica, how did we do yesterday? And I was like, I am not Jessica, number one. Number two, there are 3 women that work here and I'm like your biggest producer. How can you not remember my name? You know, and it pissed me off, but it gave me enough fuel to think to myself, well, if that guy can run a firm, then I can certainly run a firm. So I started my own firm. I found a money guy and I found the firm to buy and we ended up buying it. And there were so many things that I didn't know what I didn't know, but that naivete was actually part of the wings behind my flight, really. It was the reason why I was able to do so much because I didn't know how it should be done or how it shouldn't be done. So it was a really inspiring way to figure out my way in the world.
Wow, that is an amazing story. It really seems like you were fated to be doing this. So amazing. So I want to quickly switch gears again before you get started on your presentation and ask you, you know, something that we talk about a lot with our students and our aspiring entrepreneurs is this idea of any good business idea comes out of the need to solve for a problem that exists in the marketplace. So I think you touched on this a little bit while you were just talking, but talk to us a little bit more about the problem that you're trying to solve for, that you see specifically as it relates to investing and this conflict of interest I think you talked about, but also women in investing.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I really didn't set out to solve a problem. Like I set out to just explore. And the problem became apparent at first when I was working as a broker, that conflict of interest that I just mentioned, where essentially as a broker, you're trying to make money. You know, your first interest is yourself, not necessarily your client. So you're conflicted in terms of whose interest is most important to you. But it became even more apparent as I went on and became a trader, in that my customers were kind of secondary to the money that everybody else down the chain had to make. You know, the trader had to make this much, the sales trader had to make that much. They were always at odds with each other, and the customer was left out in the snow. Right. So I realized that when I started my firm, I wanted the customer to talk directly to the trading desk. I wanted the customer not to have all of these insulated issues so that they had to give out a little money here and give out a little money there. It really just became more transparent. I was the first person to think about this. There were other technologies and people who were thinking about the same thing, you know, how to really give power to the investor.
Right.
But then what became even more apparent as my partner Valerie and I really explored the aspect of bringing women to the table and the importance of that is really around how Wall Street itself, how the economic system is set up to make you feel stupid and incompetent and not good enough. And it does that on purpose so that it gets your money more freely. And it sounds counterintuitive, but that's exactly, we call it the financial industrial complex. Like it's set up to ensure its own success. It doesn't really care about everybody else in the system, except that it ensures its own success. So that is something that is a much bigger, broader interest of ours, is how to not necessarily knock that down, but how to go around it, how to go around that wall, and how to empower women around not only money and investing, but thinking about how we want to change the world and the legacy that we want to create with the abundance in both financial interest and knowledge that we have.
Amazing. And so let's get right into it, because I know you want to talk a little bit more about this. So without further delay, we're going to jump right into your presentation titled Build Your Empire.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Bear with me one sec. That should bring it up there. Okay, so I entitled this Building My Empire, or Building Your Empire, Building Our Empire, really.
Right.
You know, in essence, what we're trying to do here, oops, I switched screens, sorry about that. What we're trying to do here is empower women around the fact that our money actually is so powerful. We are, the GDP number, which just came out yesterday, if you're watching this on the same day that it's coming out, it's a huge number, was a huge 32%, the GDP was up. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. And essentially it is a measurement of the economic power of a nation. It's how much money can be created by that nation. And when you look at that number, when you break it down, 70% of that number is the consumer. And women are really the consumer. About 85% of the household money that's spent, and even in business, is directly related to women's decision making. So if you do that math, 85% of 70%, you come out to almost 60% of the GDP is because of women. And we're only 50% of the population. So that's huge. We are actually driving the economic engine behind America, but we don't give ourselves any kind of power behind that. So just take a look at how we rule as the consumer. So here we've got a slide that shows just exactly how much power we have behind decision-making around new homes and new cars and PCs, etc. And we know this, right? Because we're the ones who make the decision in our household. We make the decision for, this is not a scary thing for us to go shopping, right? This is something that we understand. This is a value. This is not a value. You know how to go and attack it. You know how to figure things out, right? Yeah. But then when we take a look at that same kind of thinking around investing, Women don't have that same kind of feeling of power. We feel as if we're really not sure how to go and approach it. What do these things mean? I feel like I should know this. I should know this. I blame myself for not knowing it. There's a lot of shame and blame around thinking about money and investing. And it's not just for women, it's also for men, but women in particular have a sensitivity around this. So here you can just see that the percentages of if you're married, your spouse does 58% of the thinking around investing, women only about 23%. And in 19% of the cases, both parties do it together. But I think in a very big way, we have to really separate the consumerist behavior versus the investing behavior. Consumerist is the right now decision making and spending and deciding and choosing. But investing is creating something for the future. It's actually creating the legacy for our children and the people who live beyond us, as well as the legacy of the institutions and the structures of our society. So that's why investing is so important. Women are expected to control $22 trillion this year. That might be a little bit off just because of the COVID crisis, but nonetheless, that is a tremendous amount of control that we don't really take into account. I think we pat ourselves on the back for like our spending prowess and the fact that we really drive brands' decision-making, and we're seeing that in real time this year in particular with all the social justice campaigns, et cetera. However, we don't really think about it in terms of how we're putting our money to work. When we put our money in a 401k or an IRA or give it to our financial advisor, we kind of feel like, okay, my job is done, but it's not at all done. And we really need to take that power back. Here's a really good example. And I know that most of us have heard about venture capitalists, and venture capitalists are the folks that put money into ideas at an early stage, right? These are ideas and companies that haven't really lifted off yet. They're probably not being bought by consumers in general. They're most likely, new technologies or new ways of thinking. And the venture capitalist industry is 98% men. So 98% of that decision-making is made by men, and the products and services are bought 85% by women, right? So there's a huge dichotomy there that needs to be changed. So it is changing here and there. There are now many more venture capitalists that are women that are getting money from investors, more partners that are venture capitalists in larger firms that are making decisions for those firms, which is great. But in essence, when you look at the influence of the future, the venture capital side and the private equity side, that early stage investment is where women are needed most. Because if we're going to create new ways of thinking, new ways of investing into the world, into the future of the world, we need more women down at that level. Women on the consumer side, as you can see my terrible chart here that I made by hand, obviously, we are the ones who are the early adopters, the consumers. We are driving that investment forward into the future if we do so choose. But the really early stage, which is where you make the money, okay, this is where we make the money, and the decisions in the future is in the beginning, is the influence in the early stage, in the investment stage. So where do we start? Where do we actually get our feet wet in investing? How do we actually approach this? And one of the things, and Liz, you and I were talking about this on a separate call, where, as women, we feel like in order to do something, in order to approach a scheme, we have to know everything about it. If I'm going to go and I'm going to put my money into a 401k, okay, so I need to know everything about 401ks and what they are and how to invest in them and where I'm going to trip up and what are the 10 things to know. And we really just overcompensate when it comes to needing to know everything about everything. And it creates sometimes what they call analysis paralysis. Like we think about it too much and then we go, oh, I don't even want to deal with this anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to avoid that. And what we want to do is make sure that we have other people in our lives who we trust and who we know have our best interests at hand that can help guide us towards getting from here to there. So even just thinking in our own minds, where do we start? And I think one great way to start is where you're spending your money right now. What are the brands that you know and that you love and that you trust? Where are you spending your money? Take a look at, your credit card spend or your bank account spend. What are the brands and the services that are important to you? And at the same time, when you're looking at that, you can come up with some things that you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm spending all this money with this telecom provider because I hate them and their service is awful. So that's another telltale clue. Like, why am I spending my money there? Why am I giving them my vote, right? What services can't I live without? What are things that are so important to me and have created so much abundance and wealth in my life that, I need to be a stand for, that I need to maybe invest in? And then another one is, what ideas align with my values? Is health really important to me? Longevity? Am I seeing changes in genomics that are extremely important to where I want to see the world go? Right? So these are ideas and themes. So jotting these things down is really an important first step. And some major sea change that women have really brought to the investing landscape is what we like to call ESG. And what that stands for is environmental, social, and governance concerns. So environmental is, how are you affecting the land that you're on, or the power? Is it clean energy? Is it wasteful? Social is social justice. Who's on your board? Is it made up of people who are both male and female and black and white and all different colors and strains of humanity in order to bring diversity to a voice for that community? Governance is in a similar way, notably focused on diversity, but also focused on, am I making sure that I'm doing good in the world? Like, am I giving back as much as I'm getting in the community that I'm in? Am I dealing fairly with my customers? Do I have great service? Do I have great controls over the business that I've created? So all of those things have called to arms ESG. So we see ESG types of investment strategies now, and most of them are just kind of like painting that sticker on there and saying, this is ESG, and it really is not at all ESG. So you really have to look under the hood or find somebody who you know and trust who's looking at these companies and saying, this is very responsible, and this is a kind of company that's going forth in the world in a great way. A couple of really quick examples, and this isn't a public company that you can invest in, but it gives you the kind of idea. Bombas is a sock maker, and these guys kind of went at a problem that they wanted to solve, which was what was the most asked for garment in homeless shelters, and it was socks. And so they wanted to create a service where they could give socks back, and so it became a sock company. And their idea is, for every pair that they sell, they give a pair to the homeless. Tom's is similar; they're a shoemaker. Warby Parker, similar for glasses, where they give a set of glasses to somebody who can't afford them. So those kinds of things, they're called B companies, but those kinds of things are very important to the world. And that has only come about since women have been such a force in the workplace, and been a force politically and socially, right? Where we are lacking, where we are falling behind, and we really do have the power to step up, is on the financial side, right? Is taking control of the money that we actually already have, right? The system, again, just going back to the way that Wall Street speaks to investors, is very much like, you got to do this right now. You're going to miss this opportunity, hurry, hurry, hurry. And we want to change that dynamic at my firm and say, you don't necessarily need to hurry. You need to be thoughtful. We need to be measured in the way and consistent in the way that we invest over time. There's no rush to this to get it right. We have to get it right over time. And so we appreciate and want to encourage women to take their time about investing and thinking about how they're going to be doing this over time, because we want to embrace thinking about things thoughtfully instead of rushing to judgment. And I think that, and we're seeing that in ESG investing as well. So people are being more thoughtful and more measured about the fact that it's going to take time to reverse the effects, for example, of global warming. So let's be careful about how we're doing these things into the future. And that's it. That's, I mean, there's so much more to cover, but, right. I just wanted to give just a taste of the problem that we're trying to solve, which is inviting women to the table in a way that is exciting and challenging and takes a little bit more time.
Amazing, amazing.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it was really helpful and insightful for a lot of our viewers. And I just want to like talk a little bit more about that, the risk-taking part, right? Because I think that, you know, you obviously believe in the power of women to transform and change economies and systems, but it is going to require taking risks, right? So you went through this really great checklist just now of sort of things that you can think about that will get you kind of in motion, right, of taking risks financially. So thinking about your brands, services, ideas, ESG. Is there anything that you would add to that, you know, that would really encourage women to approach this and move beyond the fear and the shame and the blame and all those feelings that, you know, we get caught up in, and just take that risk?
Sure. So there's two things that stand out for me. One is that that naivete, that not knowing everything about everything is actually a good thing. It's
Right.
actually a great thing. You don't need to know exactly how to make a product or a service that doesn't exist yet. You can't know everything yet. You've got to embark. You've got to just go and trust your gut. And that is the second piece, is really trusting your own intuition and trusting yourself to find the way. You know, even though it would be nice to have a ready set map in order to go out and start your own company and figure everything out, you just won't, you can't know everything. You can't know everything, because then what would be the fun of it, right? The fun of it really is the journey of experiencing things that you didn't expect before. And I think it does take a level of, you know, being able to laugh at yourself, being able to just kind of take everything in stride, because these mistakes have been made before by bigger and smarter and faster people than me. But I am enjoying every step of the way, simply because I know that I'm going to figure some things out, or attack some problems differently. I'm going to look at things in a different way and shine a light on elements of, you know, things that maybe other people wouldn't see, just because they didn't go through the life experience that I went through. Right.
Right.
So those are things that I think are really important to keep in mind. You know, not knowing everything about everything is a good thing. That's actually, you know, a superpower.
Mm-hmm.
And trusting your gut along the way, making sure that you really are true to yourself in terms of, you know, the way that you want to go.
Right. And you know, that makes it, that's an interesting point, especially now, because things are so up in the air, right? And it's like, who knows what anything that's going to happen. So I feel like, you know, especially as just the uncertainty, it's kind of like the perfect time, right, to take these risks. And, you know, unfortunately, I've been seeing a lot of studies of, you know, women are having to leave the workforce, and that 20
Yes.
million number might change. But I feel like this whole notion of like not knowing and having really nothing to lose is a good thing. So I'm encouraged personally by that.
Yes. Yes. And not knowing, actually, we don't ever know. We
Right.
just are pointing out, like right now, it's like, oh my gosh, we really don't know. But when do we actually know? We don't. We
Right.
really don't. So to your point, I mean, why not now? Why not now, when everything's up in the air and everybody's holding their head like, oh my gosh? Don't be that person. Just say, like, you know what? I'm going to believe in myself, and I'm going to root for myself, and I'm going to cheerlead for myself, and I can do this. And I can do whatever it is that I want to go out and do. So it's always that we don't know what's ahead. It's just that right now it just seems so, everybody's talking about the fact that we don't see it.
Yes. Amazing. So thank you so much. So helpful. And before I let you go, I just want to hear a little bit, because something that I think is really important for a lot of our aspiring entrepreneurs is to talk about, obviously we're talking about finances and money, but really about funding, right? Because I think that is another thing that trips people up when they're thinking about starting a new business. So tell us a little bit about how you approached your funding journey, you know, in starting your business, because I'm sure it was very thoughtful and interesting. So would love to hear, how did you fund your business starting out?
Sure, it became thoughtful over time. I mean, it wasn't thoughtful at first, because my experience had been when I was working for someone else and really trying to pitch in and realizing that, wow, I'm actually the biggest producer here. And then I'd ask for, some portion of the exit strategy, whatever that was. And I always got the same response, which was, oh, don't worry, honey, we got you. We'll take care of you. Don't worry, we got you, without letting me in the room, without letting me have a seat at the table. And for the first 30 or 40 times, I was like, okay, you got me, no problem. And not even saying, like, calling their BS, right? Until finally I realized that was not true. But it did take me a very long time to actually realize that was not true. And until you actually have a voice at the table and a seat at the table, your interests are not going to be served. So how did I start taking? And it wasn't until after I started my company. So I had started my firm with partners. Mm-hmm. And those partners said, oh yeah, you've got about 15% of the company. They never put it in writing. They never put anything in writing. The thing that ended up working into my favor was that the collapse after the .com crash happened. Mm-hmm. And the partners that I had at the time lost not all their capital, but they lost a lot of their capital. And so they said, you know what, we got to sell the firm, Dani. And I said, no, we don't. I actually can support my end of it. And why don't I find a buyer for the other side? So that's what I ended up doing, finding another buyer, not vetting them carefully enough. And that other buyer came in, and they were from Houston, and no offense to Houston people, they were like, Dani, don't worry, girl, we're going to do this for you. And we got you. And it was that same exact thing.
Right.
And then finally I was like, let me just buy these guys out. And so I ended up buying everybody out just from my own capital. So this was capital that I made, I worked on, and I saved in order to buy these guys out. I didn't actually go out and raise capital again until about 2004, brought in 2 partners, didn't do a formal valuation at all, but just thought about, how much money does the company make? How much of a percentage do I want to give away of that for an amount of capital? And then not thinking through that capital is not going to me, it's just going back into the business in order to make the business bigger, right? Which was okay at the time. I then stepped into using debt as a way to get working capital. So I ended up borrowing money from investors in order to build the health of my company, and then ended up paying them back. So I did that a multiple numbers of times in order to gain credibility with those investors that kept putting in more and more money. And that's essentially how I raised capital for my firm. For other companies, and I've raised tons of money for private and public companies, I've raised both equity capital, which essentially is, you're giving away a piece of your business to somebody else. And unless you have some way to buy them out, you can't get rid of them. And then debt capital, which is you pay it back, you're good. Mm-hmm. And we've done some convertible things too as well, where you're getting debt that can convert into equity capital, so you don't actually have to pay that back. So we've done a lot of different structures. I found that every single company's ideal is different. Every single team is different. So there is no right way. There's a lot of things that you can explore in order to raise capital. And I would encourage anyone who's thinking about raising capital to look at 5 or 6 different ways and do the pros and cons, because it's going to change. At one point in your company's startup, it might be one solution is ideal. And then a little bit later, you may not want to do an equity deal at a valuation that you have right now. You may want to raise debt so that you can get to a higher valuation and then raise equity. So I think that there's a lot of different things that you have to consider when raising capital for your company.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. So it seems like there's a lot of kind of trial and error that goes into this. And another thing to not be afraid of is just kind of trying different things and knowing what's going to work best for your business.
Exactly.
So, awesome. So before, I know we're running a little out of time, but I wanted to quickly talk to you about one more thing. And if you could share with us some advice for our aspiring entrepreneurs around sort of your do's and don'ts, right? So if you could go back and speak to your 25-year-old self, what would you say? Definitely do this. Definitely do not do this.
Oh my gosh, so many things. But I mean, no regrets, but I have so many things that I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew this, or I wish I knew that. I mean, I think the biggest thing was I wish I asked for more guidance from the people in my, uh, what I would call now my kind of personal board of directors, right? We should all have a personal board of directors. Even if you don't have something formal for your company, you have to have something for your own growth, right? So you have Sally and Jane and Sandy and all of these different people that bring different things to you to empower your abundance in knowledge, your abundance in ways of thinking, your abundance in capital production. So you need to have these people around you so that you can go to them and say, I'm in trouble with this. What should I do? Or I'm not sure how to be thinking about this. Or am I wasting too much time with this? So some of the things that I would say that I wish I did a little bit differently is I wish I was a little clearer with myself on communication with some partners, and not only partners in my business, but partners that I worked with that were large, either vendors for me or large clients of mine, instead of being afraid to be heard. So instead of being afraid of like, oh, I don't want to hurt his feelings, or maybe he's going through this and maybe he's going through that, just being super clear. Being super clear is always going to cut through all the nonsense and the emotion and their emotion and everybody's feelings. Just being super clear and concise and making sure that you're being heard by the other person, making sure that they're responding back to you. This is not just for little kids and moms and dads. This is for every relationship in my life. So that was one thing that was really important to me. Second thing that I'll leave you with is trusting my gut, trusting my intuition, and knowing in my heart and soul that something was like not feeling right or not feeling good, but doing it anyway because so-and-so expected it of me, or I thought it was the right thing to do. Always going with my gut would have been the right thing, because even though I might have looked back and said, oh, maybe I should have done it differently, I knew I was true to my authentic self. So that's something that being really clear about inside is just a guiding light.
That is amazing. And it makes me feel better because I have a little mantra I do every morning of like, use your voice, trust your heart and your intuition. So
I love that. I love
right, it's
that.
just like universal that we need to be doing these things. So
Yes.
that is amazing advice. And I also think, you know, things like I said, that it could serve us just in other areas of our life. So thank you so much for that. And I also love that idea of having your personal board of directors, because
Yes.
I think that is something that a lot of people don't think about, is just having your people, right, that surround you and give you honest feedback and good advice and all the things that we need every day. So thank you so much. So lastly, I think you had a slide for that, but do you want to just show us and tell us one more time what your digital and social channels are so that we can?
Yes. Sure. So on Twitter, our firm is at Gather, Grow, Give. Our LinkedIn is Divine Asset Management, and our Facebook is also Divine Asset Management. And that's for the divine side. That's the side where we focus on women and aspirational manifesting. So would love to have some of the entrepreneurs and women come check us out.
Amazing. Yes, everybody check them out. And we just want to thank you so much, Dani, for being with us today. Dani Hughes, co-founder of Divine Asset Management. Thank you for sharing your time with us and your amazing words of wisdom.
Thank you so much, Liz. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.